Welcome back to the Purple Worm podcast, a group podcast where four British blokes, myself, Pete Jones, Dave Aldridge and Colin Green, talk about all things RPG with a British slant. And we're continuing our recent theme of talking about myths and legends and how they can be utilised in RPGs by talking about kobolds. And Pete is going to take it away and tell us what the origins of kobolds are and how D&D ruined it.
We all know kobolds from D&D. They're the reptilian.
No, I'm going to ask you now. Why do you call them kobolds? Aren't they kobolds? Why am I just wrong?
I've always called them kobolds. I've always called them kobolds.
Yeah, I've always called them kobolds as well.
It's a northern thing.
Kobolds. No, okay. I call them kobolds.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if kobolds is like the American pronunciation.
It could be.
No, Americans call them really specific. They call them kobolds.
Oh,
it's
right,
really
okay.
weird.
That's odd.
But
if you know anyone who's listening, like don't know why I'm doing this. You can't see me. Call in and tell us why there's different pronunciations of kobolds.
Yeah,
I actually quite like to know, to be honest.
I've always called them kobolds.
Because I have heard other people call them kobolds, but I've always pronounced it kobolds.
I have as well. Anyway, sorry, Pete.
But yeah, to us, the kobolds or kobolds are reptilian humanoids that usually sort of infest the dungeons. And that is what we've always thought of them. And I must admit that I first thought that a kobold had been a creature created by TSR specifically for Dungeons and Dragons. But no, kobolds, if you don't know, come from Germany. And the legend in Germany was they were underground creatures, often seen as evil, and they were found in medieval mining towns. And the locals used to pray for protection for them. And if they didn't pray for protection, then any accidents that happened around the town and cave-ins and rock slides that plagued the miners were often blamed on kobolds. But kobolds can also be found in other cultures as well. And in Cornwall and Devon, they're known as knockers or knackers. And that all depends on what part of the county you are from. And again, it's a mining thing. Miners, if you don't know, are very superstitious people. And while I was researching this, there's the area I live in, Wrexham in Wales, there was lots of mines around. And going back to the 1800s, one of the local mines, the miners there used to go to work every morning, and the mine employed a female in the office. And apparently, if you see a female in the morning before you go down the mine, it was considered unlucky. And the miners were that perturbed by it that they petitioned the mine owner and asked them to sack the woman because they couldn't face seeing her before going down the mine in the morning. And these are some of the bizarre sort of superstitions miners had. So the knockers and the knackers, they were sort of small creatures. Some described them as gnomes, some described them as dwarves. And in Wales, we called them the coblini. And in the Welsh culture, the coblini, they used to show the miners where the good loads of the tin or the metals were. And the knocking sound was how they used to tell the miners where the good metal was in the mines. And that's where the knockers nickname came from. And the stories of the miners used to leave them little offerings and try and keep the coblini or the knockers happy. And if they were pleased and fed, then they would show the miners where all the good ore was.
So Pete, sorry to put in there. This talk about the miners like leaving offerings. So is that like the old legends of like people with like brownies and sort of stuff like that in the house, where you leave like a saucer of milk for them and stuff like that?
All similar sort of thing. And there is a story of a bloke called Barker in Devon who he didn't believe in these knockers, or he thought they were more trouble than they were worth, and he wouldn't leave an offering for them. And the knockers actually threw their tools at him and hit him on the knee, and poor Barker walked with a limp for the rest of his life. And apparently there's a saying in Devon that you've got a limp like Barker's knee, and that's where that came from. So
I like that. No, let's not forget, just with John's interjection, that you were talking about the coblini, of course.
Yeah.
Etymologically, these are all very closely related branches of the same tree. Goblin Eye, this is your goblins.
Yeah.
Kobold and goblin possibly go back to the same root etymologically.
Right.
So none of these things are too far off of each other.
In fact, the Cornish, they actually thought that they were the ghosts of the Jews who had worked the mines in the 11th and 12th century. That's where their sort of legend had come from, which was a little bit different to what the Welsh and some of the other mines thought. And then besides the Kobold Eye and the Knackers, a lot of these miners in Wales and in Devon and Cornwall, when the big rush happened in America, the Americans were short of miners. And they were desperate for miners to go across America to work the mines there. So, of course, all the Cornish and the Welsh miners went over there for the pay. They were paid to go over there. And, of course, they took all their superstitions and their myths with them. And, of course, the Americans have the Tommy knocker, and that is derived from the knocker. But I think in the States now, the Tommy knocker has become more of a spirited, evil type creature now than it is sort of a mischievous gnome or a dwarf or fairy, that sort of. And obviously, it was made famous by Stephen King in his book, The Tommy Knocker.
Yeah. Didn't you get a rake of German miners going over to America as well, which might be your kobolds or your kobolds kind of story travelling over there?
See, now, I'm not trying to derail it, and I'm sure you guys are correct me if wrong, but I seem to remember sort of way back in like the sort of earlier days of D&D, weren't kobolds more like sort of like dogmen?
I was going to say that.
Yeah. And then they've become sort of more like draconic as the editions have gone on?
Yeah, they have.
They were little dogmen when I first started playing back in the day, and the illustration in Moldvay, they look like little dogmen, I'm pretty sure.
So I'm sure I remember seeing some old like Reaper miniatures where they were like little dogmen.
Yeah.
But in D&D, what you're trying to do is you're trying to multiply the number of beasties that you can get. Whereas actually what you find in folklore is you've got lots of different names for the same kind of thing. Right. Mischievous spirits, sometimes they're connected to Satan, sometimes not. They get attached to these local little things. But basically that's what you've got. You've got these mischievous, impish entities. Yeah. They get dwarves, goblins, kobolds, whatever.
Yeah, in Germany they had other ones on the mines that haunted the mines called the Wichtlein, and that translates to whites. And of course we have whites in D&D, so you can see where they probably picked a lot of these names from and then changed it.
I was going to say it's interesting because obviously we've talked already in the sort of previous bits where we're talking about how these legends sort of like evolve over time and whether we're sort of like creating our own mythologies as we're sort of like playing games and stuff like that, RPGs. It's interesting to see that even these monsters that have been like staples of D&D for so long, that even they've sort of changed as time's gone on. I mean, another example is you've got like the old like pig-faced orcs from earlier editions, and how they've sort of changed as time's gone on. So even like within the published stuff, these sort of in-game mythologies and these in-game creatures, they're always sort of continually evolving as different writers are brought on board, different creative teams are like reinterpreting them for different sort of niches within the games.
And if you've got somebody like the Tolkien estate trying to sue you, then you have to change them as well.
Well, yeah.
Although Tolkien didn't create orcs or goblins,
no, definitely not.
And even he couldn't decide. He was using the words, but even he couldn't decide what the difference was between an orc and a goblin. It's very imprecise.
Yeah, it was a very sort of grey
they're drawing
border.
on the same kind of mischievous imp. Basically, that's what you've got.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously Tolkien pulled on a lot of mythology, as did D&D. And various, and pretty much every role-play game since the year dot. But you mentioned whites there, Pete. Obviously, you've got various sort of ghost-like creatures in Middle-earth. You know, they talk about, obviously one of the more famous being like the Nazgul, who are like ancient human kings who've been corrupted and sort of brought back as these sort of deathly spirits, which, if you look at the sort of white, that's pretty much the sort of definition of some versions of it.
Actually, you've got Barrow Whites, haven't you?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Tom Bombadil intervenes with the Barrow Whites,
and you said about it being a smaller number of monsters in myth than in RPGs. Don't a lot of this stuff just go back to like elves or the Fae? Just
right,
the Fae.
The fair folk.
Yeah, the fair folk,
yeah.
Like a pixie or a fairy or an elf.
Yeah.
Even in Tolkien.
Or a hobgoblin or whatever. Yeah.
I think just to expand a little bit on what Dave was saying, it's absolutely right that in mythology you might say, oh well, we've got these strange sort of like fairy, sort of like browny goblin style creatures, and they're all pretty much the same thing, just different names and different places. But as Dave's saying, when you come to D&D and they're like, right, we need a certain amount of monsters, it's far easier to go like, right, well, what if we take like these goblins, these dwarves, and these things which are all sort of from the same sort of thing, and we just make them a little bit more distinct and we give them a particular flavour.
Right, and of course we're not. I mean, I'm not meaning to flatten out the folklore because, as Pete's given a good account of, I mean, all of these beliefs had very specific local flavours, generational iterations, stuff like that. But what they do is they actually defy codification.
Yes.
There aren't easy distinctions. There's no easy distinction in folklore in a kobold and a goblin and an orc. But in gaming, you want different kinds of challenge. So you associate. You give different stats to these different creatures.
And like I said, because obviously even in like the most rules light of games, you have some game mechanics in it. You have to apply mechanics to certain things. So that's another way of distinguishing these creatures. So you go like, oh yeah, a goblin's got like 1 hit dice, an orc's got 2 hit dice. So why has it got 2 hit dice? Oh, maybe it's a bit bigger and a bit more sort of burly and a bit more brutish. And so perhaps some of the differences is sort of like being led by the sort of various different like mechanisms they use in the game.
So that whole goblin, hobgoblin, bugbear type hierarchy, it's just about how many hit dice they've got, isn't it? Some are bigger than others. So some have got more hit dice.
I think I don't know about you guys, but do you not end up just throwing all that out though? And so like when I say throw it all out, I kind of I quite often I'll look for a monster manual and I'll get ideas and I'll be inspired. But the actual names and all of that don't mean anything to me. I just look at it as ways of because a monster manual shows how the designer has used the rules in different ways and stacked things up in different ways to create certain effects, and it all gets a bit. In my mind, I think it gets a bit amorphous, kind of.
I think I certainly do now, because like I say, to carry on using the various different like goblinoids as an example, it's like now if I was going to say, you're being attacked by like a small tribe or band of like goblinoids, I might use the stats from a bugbear for the leader, but I wouldn't be like, 6 goblins run out with like a huge bugbear leading it. I'd just be like, 7 goblins run out. The leader's a bit more sort of brutish. He's a bit more sort of hirsute. He's got better armour on.
So I go further than that. So I will never call goblins.
No,
I'll let the players do that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
I won't introduce that language, or even all. I won't even call small people halflings. Like I'll let the players do all.
But what you get to I find with players, especially ones who've been playing a long time, is you describe the foe they're facing, and then you can hear them. Is it a wraith? Is it a ghoul? And they're trying to guess what it is, aren't they?
Well, yeah, that's the lovely thing as well about reskinning stuff.
Yeah,
because I'm sure we've all come across players who've like memorised like the contents of the monster manual, and if you go like, an orc's coming out, they'll be like, well, that's got 2 hit dice. He's probably got an axe. He's going to go into some sort of berserker rage when he hits 0 hit points. Whereas if you go, a group of goblins come out, they're about. Well, like I say, you might not even say goblins. If you've got like a bunch of grey, green-skinned humanoids with gnarled, plaque-encrusted teeth run out, wearing loincloths, swinging like notched axes that are rusty and badly maintained, immediately the players are like, could be goblins, could be orcs, could be bugs. So even if they've memorised all of the monster manual, they're put in the same position as their characters.
Or another thing is as a GM, you describe them as goblins. They know they're goblins, and then you switch their immunities or their skills, and then that will really throw the players in. How come these goblins can't be hurt by slashing weapons? That's not right.
Well, it's like I said, I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but one of my favourite things to do using like the sort of titular dragons is just to like change how you describe the breath weapon. use the same damage dice, same area of effect, same everything. But if you go like, oh, this red dragon appears and he goes, they'll be like, oh, here comes the fire breath, and you're like, oh, a roiling cloud of poisonous vapour issues forth from his mouth. They'll be like, what?
Yeah.
And that'll panic them far more than any prosaic description of like this fireball coming out from it, because they're expecting that.
Yeah.
I had a dragon turtle in my first session of Jungles of Chult, and I'd never had a dragon turtle before, and I didn't know they breathe steam.
Yeah, scalding steam.
Yeah, I thought, oh man, that's
quite
really cool.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
You did better than me, man.
And when he's talking, when he talks, this turtle, Arameg, he just, as he gets agitated, puffs of a bit of steam starts coming out. You know,
Nice.
so
That's pretty sweet.
I thought that's quite cool, steam. You know.
I'll tell you what, you're doing better than me in the Jungles of Chult, man. I only got stomped by a T-Rex in my first session.
Well, we nearly had that in the second session in the dinosaur races. So.
That's it, man. Right,
We were going to do that. We were going to talk about our games. Are we going to do that in the next one?
Yeah, next one.
Yeah, I think
We
we're
should
probably
do
getting a
that,
bit on with that. Have you got anything else you want to say about kobolds, Pete?
No, I've got nothing else. All I would say to people is that if you've got some of these creatures, mix them up a bit, change it around.
I just wanted to ask you guys, whilst on the subjects of mixing and changing around, did you ever get any grief from your players, like for calling foul on that?
No, not really.
I never did, but
No.
Because I mean, I had a few people, I had a few sort of like questioning murmurs, not grief, just people like being like, oh, what's going on with this? I thought red dragons breathe fire, but I just respond with like, well, that's what you've heard.
You've never.
Yeah.
So I think you've been lucky, because you hear them stories where someone like a DM will change something, and this may just be like an urban myth, but they get called out by their players like, oh no, a red dragon breathes fire and it does this much damage, man, you are cheating.
Yeah, I don't know what game they're playing.
No,
I
'cause
know
I've
what you
never-
mean. The people that have got the monster manual and they hold it open at the page and say, hold on, your monster didn't behave right. I don't know what the game... I've never had that player. I don't know what game they're playing.
See, I'd love if I'd almost like someone to do that, because I'd love to like bamboozle them a bit by going like, oh, where did your character hear that?
Yeah.
And then like if they say, oh, I probably heard it off someone, I'd be like, how many like red dragons have they faced? I'd be like, oh no, you're thinking of like a crimson dragon. Oh no, this is an entirely different species of dragon. It's an entirely different shade of red.
I'd be tempted to like, oh, pass me that manual there a second. That's how much use that is to you now, unconscious person laying on the floor, because winding me up with that.
I should point out to our listeners that Colin's not seriously advocating like committing GBH against his.
No, well, I've already
He
explained. I
plays
don't
this
have that
game with
problem.
his kids, remember? Yeah.
Well, the beauty of kids is they've never met these creatures before, so to them it's all new, isn't it?
Oh, you're joking.
They've
Sonny,
got the monster manual.
Yeah.
we've just discussed what they're like. They go through it. They memorise it all.
Do you go through all the card decks, the 5e card decks, and the monster card decks?
we do, because it's almost like a little activity, isn't it? Get that out, go through it. Oh, what about? Oh, look at this one. This is
My
thing,
kids my kids don't want to play D&D, but they love the monster. They'll sit of an afternoon and pour through it. They don't want to play it.
I think as well, I mean, we're talking about the potential downside of that, people memorising the monster manuals and knowing all the ability and whatever. But I think, like everything, there's also like a really positive side to that, because like how, like you said, Dave, your kids aren't really into D&D, but how much interest have you got to have to be like, oh, I'm not really bothered about this game. However, I'm still going to like read this book and remember everything that's in it.
But they'll talk to me about monster stats, because they play Pokemon and stuff like that. They play these computer games, so they'll go through the monster manual and they'll compare the stats of the creatures. They'll be like, whoa, look at that creature. That's got way better strength than this. Look at all his hit dice. It's great. So they're interacting with it, and they'll design creatures and monsters without even wanting to play the game.
And it's like, sorry, go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say the monsters my players hate is anything that can reduce their level, because they've worked so
the old
bloody
level
hard for it.
drain.
Oh, the level drain. That is, if they know it's a level drain creature, they run it. They're not fighting them at all.
To tell you what I used to do to like house roll acts, I was never a fan of going like, oh yeah, you've spent ages getting these levels, now you've lost them because they're like a bad roll. What I used to do, you used to get like in you used to randomly roll for like the age of your character in some version of it, and it'd give you like, this is the maximum age that race can reach.
Yeah.
I always used to just go like, when they hit you, whatever damage they do, that also gets added to your age.
Didn't that used to happen? I'm sure there was a monster in AD&D that aged you.
Aged you, might be.
Because
Or was it a weapon?
Because if you think about it, the actual effects of it aren't particularly like horrendous, because you've got to take some serious beating to actually be like, oh, I'm now 100 years old, I've died as a human.
Yeah.
But if you like describe, I mean, I did it in one of my previous Middlelands campaign where they were fighting against a wight that could level drain, and they tried like barring a door against it, and I described like as it walked forward and touched the door, like the wood was like aging in front of their eyes and crumbling to pieces, and it just walked through it. And obviously when they got hit by it, it was like, oh yeah, okay, so maybe you're now 6 years older. In game terms, whatever, but they were absolutely bricking themselves when they saw it just like decay the door in front of them.
See, I'm basically chucking level drain into the Black Hack all the time, because with the monster descriptions in the Black Hack, all bets are off. So the players never know what they might be coming up against. So I quite often have creatures that will drain permanent hit points, which is bloody scary, and is about half of leveling up in the Black Hack. It's just your hit points. So, and then I'll have creatures that will drain permanent ability points. Drain permanent charisma, drain permanent strength, whatever it is. Or I've just bunged in a disease. They went down in a dungeon, half of them have caught a disease that drains dexterity, permanent dexterity. You'll never get it back. And that's terrifying. But the thing is, the players don't jib against it because they didn't know it was going to happen. You know, they caught the disease. So they didn't know it was a creature that was going to do it, so they run away. I quite like that. They'd say any creature could just drain permanent attribute points.
Well, Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, a quick plug there, in the Twitch chat, has said that apparently it's ghosts in D&D that age people. Which, I believe they've got like a sort of gruesome visage that ages you when you see it, if I remember correctly.
That's
so right. Jason's back. Hey, Jason.
Good catch.
Okay, so that's it for another episode of Purple Worm. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of kobolds and knockers. If you did, or if you didn't, you can leave us a voicemail using the Anchor app, or you can get in touch via email, purplewormpodcast@gmail.com. We really do enjoy listening to and reading those messages. So we hope you'll join us next time, where we'll be talking about the Victorian era legend of Spring-Heeled Jack. So until we see you next time, from myself, Pete, Colin and Dave, take care, have fun, and watch out for those purple worms. We'll see you soon.